He wore a mask every single day of his life. Not for Halloween, not for a costume, every day. From the moment he woke up to the moment he fell asleep. His mother made him wear it. She gave him one reason and one reason only. If someone sees your face, something bad will happen. She never said what. She never said who. She never explained anything beyond those 9 words. For years, he believed her. For years, he was obedient and patient and trusting. And then he met a girl in the woods, and the girl asked to see his face, and he let her. And something bad happened. Something far worse than anything his mother had been able to bring herself to describe. Something he has been living with ever since, and collecting. This is DreadRelic. Drop a comment right now and tell me where you are watching from. I read every single one. Whether you are watching from Lagos or London, from Accra or Atlanta, from somewhere quiet and dark where you are very much alone right now, say hello. Drop your city, drop your country, and if this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button before this story is over. You will want someone to talk to when it ends. Now, let us begin. Most of my childhood was spent in the same 20 square miles of forest somewhere in the Appalachian wilderness. I lived there with my mother in a cabin she claimed to have built with her own 2 hands. I believed her for a long time. Now I am fairly certain she found an abandoned structure deep enough in the trees that no one else had thought to look for it, and repaired it as well as she could with what she had available. In the winter, the small fires we managed in the fireplace did almost nothing to warm the space. Most winter nights were spent with the 2 of us curled together under the same blanket, listening to the wind find the gaps in the walls and push through them. In the summer, the cabin became so humid that you could see the wood itself sweating, beating along the grain in thin lines that caught the afternoon light. On those nights, we chose to sleep outside rather than wake up wrung completely dry from the heat. Even with the clouds of mosquitoes that pressed against my mother's makeshift netting made from old fabric scraps. Even with the bites covering every inch of exposed skin by morning, it was still better. Our days back then followed a simple and unforgiving routine. My mother hunted small animals. I gathered firewood and picked berries. On rare and treasured days, we would take a break and spend hours together singing or reading from the small collection of books she kept on the single shelf above the fireplace. But survival came first. Survival always came first. My mask made foraging harder than it should have been. I constantly had to pull the white cotton sheet upward to fit the eye holes properly over my eyes. Within an hour, it was always soaked completely through with sweat, the fabric pressing against my skin in ways that made the heat worse. The only time I ever removed it was when my mother bathed me. I would try to catch my reflection in the water those times. But the water was never clear enough to show me anything. I wondered even then whether she had ever truly looked at my face. She would have seen it the day I was born. She must have seen it at least once. I learned very early not to ask my mother questions about the mask. The only answer I ever received was a single sentence. If you take your mask off in front of someone, something bad will happen. If I pressed further, she would say, I am your mother, and you should trust that I know what is best. And I did. For a long time. My mother was my entire world. I loved her as completely as a child can love a parent. We spent almost all of our time together, and I carry mostly happy memories of her alongside the other kind. But not all of them are happy. And some of the unhappy ones started very early. I was somewhere between 4 and 6 years old when the first bad memory happened. I was playing outside in our garden on a warm afternoon while my mother was on the far side of the yard doing laundry. I was hopping through the rows and stepping on any pest I found. The satisfaction of pressing my shoe down and lifting it to check the underside was one of the specific and simple pleasures available to a child who has very few others to choose from. I had worked my way to the end of the garden when I noticed the rabbit cage. My mother had kept several rabbits that she had caught in traps over the months, breeding them for meat. She told me not to get attached to any of them and reminded me regularly that we would be eating all of them at some point. Of course, I had named every single one of them and loved pressing my fingers through the wire to feel their soft fur between my fingertips. One of the females, whom I had named Daisy after a character in one of my mother's books, was watching me as I approached. She did not scatter or hide the way the others did. She simply looked at me, chewing steadily, watching with a calm and uncomplicated curiosity that I found impossible not to return. The way she held my gaze made me smile underneath the mask. We looked at each other for a while, and then I felt the sudden urge to untie the twine at my neck. The mask fell to the ground. I slowly pulled it the rest of the way from my face. Daisy continued to watch. I brought my bare face closer to hers through the wire. A warmth came over me that I had never felt before. Something about being seen, even by something small-minded and without any understanding of what it was looking at, even by a rabbit. The feeling of having something look at my real face was almost overwhelming. The rabbit did not cower. She did not recoil or scatter. She looked at me no differently than she looked at the other rabbits. My smile grew wider than it ever had before. And then my mother called my name from around the corner. I scrambled for the mask on the ground. I was not fast enough. She grabbed me by the shoulder while keeping her gaze deliberately aimed at the sky and struck the back of my head hard enough to blur my vision for several seconds. "Put your mask back on right now," she cried. I did as she said. She dragged me away from the cage, leaving Daisy still watching the spot where my face had been. We had Daisy for dinner that night. I watched my mother take her from the cage through my bedroom window. I heard the frantic small sounds before they stopped. Daisy lay on the table that evening, charred and still in the center of the plate. My mother pulled off one of the small legs and placed it on my plate in front of me. "Eat," she said. The tears soaking the inside of my mask made it harder to breathe. I pulled the mouth hole down slightly and lifted the leg to my lips. "Eat," she said again. I bit into the unseasoned meat and pulled it from the bone. I closed my eyes while chewing. I swallowed. My mother nodded with satisfaction and began eating her own portion. "Do you understand what could have happened if I had accidentally seen your face?" she asked. "No," I said. "You will not tell me." She gave her standard answer. "Something bad." I stared at my plate. Something bad. I did not push further. Something about the word bad had taken on a new quality that afternoon that I could not yet name and did not yet understand, but could feel pressing at the edges of every thought I had for weeks afterward. I was 8 or 9 the first time I met another person who was not my mother. I had a new mask by then. She had made this one from thick cloth, something between a jacket lining and canvas, and it breathed better than the first one, which made the summer trips out to collect berries considerably more bearable. I was several yards ahead of my mother one afternoon when I spotted a bush covered in red berries. We mostly gathered dark purple ones, bitter and dense. The red ones had a sweet, tangy flavor that I still crave sometimes, even now. I rushed toward the bush with my basket and a great deal more enthusiasm than coordination. I had not fully adjusted to the sudden extra length of my arms and legs from a growth earlier that year, so I moved in a way that was more determined than graceful. As I approached the bush, it moved slightly. Something inside it. I assumed a squirrel or some small animal I could easily send on its way. A mop of blonde hair poked out from one side of the bush. I moved around it. A blue-eyed girl turned to face me. She was around my age. Her hair fell past her shoulders and was full of leaves. Dirt stains on her clothing and scratches across her bare legs told me she had been out in the woods for a while. "Hi," she said, with a bright and completely uncomplicated smile. I stepped back instinctively. "Why are you wearing a mask?" she asked. "Are you a superhero?" She reached into her back pocket and pulled out a rolled comic book. She handed it to me. Spider-Man was written on the cover. It was the first time I had ever seen anyone else wearing a mask, though his was considerably better than mine. "You should get one like that instead," she said. The sound of leaves behind me announced my mother approaching with her bow. Her eyes widened when she saw the girl. Behind the girl, a large bearded man stepped out from between the trees, with both hands raised immediately in a gesture of submission, moving himself slowly between his daughter and my mother's weapon. His name was Monty. The girl's name was Jamie. They were camping nearby, he said. He apologized for crossing onto our land without knowing. My mother kept the bow raised. After several tense minutes, during which Monty sent Jamie away to collect firewood, and my mother refused to lower the weapon, something eventually shifted. He told her that anyone living this deep in the woods was hiding from something, just as they were. He said he did not care what we were doing out here and did not want trouble. He pointed to the tallest tree in the area and told my mother they would not cross it again, neither him nor his daughter. She lowered the bow. I watched Jamie disappear between the trees. I kept watching long after she was gone. That night, I snuck out of the cabin for the first time. My mother was exhausted after any full day of hunting and was almost impossible to wake once she had fallen asleep. I followed the trail, remembering what Monty had said about their vehicle being 2 miles down the path. I walked in the darkness and tried to understand what I was doing and why I was trying so hard to see this girl again when I had lived contentedly for my entire life with only my mother for company. Or I had thought I was content. Walking through the dark woods toward the faint orange glow of a campfire visible between the trees, I was beginning to understand that contentment and happiness are not the same thing at all, and that I had been confusing the absence of suffering with the presence of joy for longer than I had realized. I spotted Monty sitting in a chair beside the fire before I reached the clearing. Jamie was dancing around the flames. I moved closer without realizing I had stepped completely out of the tree line. Jamie spotted me mid-step. She said something to her father and then came skipping in my direction. "Hey, Spider-Man," she said. "I like your new mask." "Thanks," I said. "My name is Nestor." "I like Spider-Man better," she said without hesitation. She grabbed my hand and pulled me into the woods. Her hand was soft and warm despite the chill in the night air. I still remember the exact temperature of it, the specific feeling of it against my palm. Some sensations press themselves into memory in a way that no amount of deliberate thinking can replicate. She pulled me to a small ditch with a thin stream running along the bottom. She slid down the bank and caught my arm before I went face first into the creek. She laughed. I laughed back. "Look," she said, pointing at the water. "Tadpoles," she whispered. In the moonlight, reflected on the surface, tiny black dots moved in clusters along the shallow edge. "They will grow legs soon," she said. "That is what I learned in school. Do you go to school?" I shook my head. Her father called her name from somewhere in the trees. She climbed back up the bank and waved at me before disappearing. I stood at the edge of the stream for a long time after she left, looking at the tadpoles, thinking about legs. I only visited on nights my mother was deeply exhausted. Sometimes Jamie was already asleep when I arrived, and I would stand at the edge of the tree line for a while before turning back. We saw each other once every couple of weeks over the months that followed. But those meetings made up for all the time between them. Seeing her was like sunlight after weeks of rain. On those late-night meetings, she told me everything she knew about the world outside these woods. Friends from her hometown, restaurants she missed, movies she had seen. A whole afternoon she had once spent at her local library reading whatever book on the shelf had the most interesting cover. "Have you ever read The Boxcar Children?" she asked me one night. I shook my head. My mother had a small collection of books, but most were too dense to hold my attention for long. The only 3 I had managed to finish were field guides to local wildlife and an old faded cookbook with letters so worn in places they were barely readable. "Whenever I leave," Jamie said, hitting tall grass with a stick, "you can come visit me and borrow it. I have the whole collection. And we can go to the movies. I love the movies. I used to go all the time before my parents stopped being together. I asked what that meant. She explained it to me. She knew so much more than I did about everything. Movies, books, the world, all of it. You have really lived out here your whole life, Spider-Man? She asked. I think so, I said. That is actually kind of cool, she said. You are like Tarzan, except you were not raised by gorillas. She laughed. We found a clearing and sat in the cool grass. Fireflies drifted through the tall grass around us like floating embers pulled loose from a fire. We looked at each other in the dark and both smiled. Why do you wear a mask? She asked, not looking up at me. I knew it would come up eventually. I had been grateful for how long she had gone without asking. My mother says something bad will happen, I told her. She picked at the grass for a moment. Then she stood and offered me her hand to help me up. Works for me, she said simply. And as we stood together in the moonlight, I understood something very clearly for the first time. There was no way my face was anywhere near as nice as hers. A year passed. My mother eventually stopped trying to prevent the meetings. After a confrontation one night in the yard where I finally demanded answers she could not bring herself to give, she told me I could keep visiting if I wanted. Just keep your mask on. Jamie and I began meeting in the daylight after that, which made it much easier to explore the woods together. She learned the things I had spent years learning in this forest. How to identify poisonous plants by their leaves and their smell. How to orient yourself and find the way back if you are lost. How to track an animal through the undergrowth by what it leaves behind. I taught her to shoot a bow and arrow over the course of one afternoon. We sat behind a fallen log near a clearing where my mother often hunted quail. I fired first and brought one down on the opening shot. It was the first animal I had ever killed entirely on my own. And Jamie was there to see it. I realized in that moment, sitting beside that fallen log with the echo of the shot still fading in the trees around us, that I wanted her there for every big moment in my life. Every single one of them. An hour later, the small flock returned to the clearing and I handed her the bow. I moved behind her to help with the position. Her hair smelled like sweat, and the woods and the specific outdoor smell of a person who had been living outside for months. I found that I liked it. I placed my arms around hers and positioned them slowly and carefully. She breathed in sharply when I moved close, then settled quickly. I covered her hand with mine and drew the string back to the correct tension. She looked back at me and smiled. I think I have it, she said. I stepped away. She aimed. She breathed. She released. The flock scattered into the air. We watched the arrow. It landed. We ran to it together and found the quail struck on its side, still struggling to move. Oh no, Jamie said, and she began to cry. I picked the small bird up and held it between us. She started to say that she thought we could help it, and before she could finish, I twisted its neck cleanly. I held it up. She stared at me with wide eyes for a moment and then looked away. It is okay, she said quietly. You can keep it. We spent the rest of that afternoon in the clearing. She poked at rocks with her pocket knife and stared at the tree line and said very little. And then she dropped her head and began to cry properly. What is wrong? I asked. She looked up at me. I want to go home, she said. I dropped my head. I know my father has been hiding me from my mother, she continued. He picked me up from school one day and told me we were going on a trip, that we would be back soon. I believed him for a long time, but I am not a little kid anymore. I miss my mother. I miss my friends. She did not mean to hurt me with any of it, but hearing all of it hurt anyway. I had believed she was happy out here. I had believed that all we needed was each other and this forest and the simple life inside it. I want to leave, she said, and I want you to come with me. I sat back. What? I cannot leave. She set her head on her knees. Why do you wear that mask? she asked again, quieter this time. I have to, I said, because your mother says. I paused, then I nodded. Your mother is lying just like my father is, she said. I bet you $1 million that nothing will happen if you take it off right now. She reached over and gripped the neck of the mask. I pulled back. She let go. She paused. Then she reached again, and this time, I let her. Everything seemed to slow. She pulled the mask upward with careful hands, careful around my nose, careful around my eyes. The world went completely dark for a moment as the last edge cleared my face. And then Jamie's face was right there in front of mine, smiling, the sun directly behind her. We looked at each other for several long and quiet seconds. You see, she said, nothing happened. You do not even have any scars. Really? I asked. She shook her head. And then she leaned forward and kissed me on the lips. My eyes went wide for a single moment. Then I closed them. It felt exactly right, perfect in the way that very few things in a life manage to feel. She pulled back and smiled. Let us leave tonight, she said. 1,000 things moved through my mind at once. Whether this was the right decision, whether my mother would manage without me, whether I was truly ready to leave the only world I had ever known. But I understood as I stood there holding Jamie's hand in that clearing that I could do all of it as long as she was beside me. I nodded. She stood and offered me her hand. I took it. Meet me here when the moon is in the center of the sky, she said. She started out of the clearing. I followed a few steps behind. She stopped. Her arms dropped to her sides. Her pocket knife was in her right hand. It was shaking. Jamie, are you okay? She turned to face me. Her eyes were wide. Her mouth was pressed shut. Jamie, I moved toward her. She lifted the knife. I froze. She moved it toward her own face, held it inches from her cheek. Jay. She pressed the blade in, and I screamed. She pulled the blade along the full length of her face without stopping. I ran toward her, and a kick to my stomach sent me to the ground before I reached her. She continued, methodically, without expression, without any sound at all. Again and again, I scrambled back to my feet and tried to reach her, and again she kept me back while the knife continued its work. A voice came from the woods behind me. Jamie! Cried Monty. He came running into the clearing from between the trees. I heard a scream, he said, breathing hard. He saw the knife in her hand. He saw what was already on the ground. He glanced at me briefly. A strange, complete blankness moved across his face. He reached into his own pocket without looking down. He drew a larger knife than hers. And he began to do the same thing to himself, moving through the same pattern, the same direction, the same methodical and terrible silence. I did not want to look at what Jamie had done. I did not want to turn around and look. But something very deep and very old in me that had no interest in what I wanted made me look anyway. My brain sent one clear instruction: leave. My body did not follow it. I looked, muscle and tissue where her face had been, eyelids intact but not blinking. Her nose was gone. Her lips were gone. 2 rows of small teeth exposed completely to the open afternoon air. She raised one arm at her side, and she held something up toward me in her open hand. I did not stay to see what it was. I ran, back through the trees, back through the darkening woods, back to the cabin with my mask pulled back over my face before I had even reached the edge of the tree line. My mother was on the porch peeling husks from corn when I came stumbling out of the trees and hit the ground. She ran to me and knelt down. Inside my mask, I was drowning in a way that had nothing to do with the fabric pressing against my face. Her fingers found the untied twine at the bottom of my neck. Oh no, she said. Did she see your face? I could not form the right words. They are still alive, I said. We can go get them out of the woods. It is too late for them, she said. I am so sorry. I wept until I had nothing left. Then I looked at my mother. "When you said something bad would happen if someone saw my face," I said, "you did not mean something bad would happen to me, did you?" She was quiet for a very long time. She brought me a glass of water and sat across the table from me. She took my hand in both of hers. "I did not want to tell you this," she said. "I hoped I would never have to." She looked at the grain of the wood in the table. Then she looked at me. "In the town where I grew up," she said, "this small place on the other side of these woods, there were stories. Stories about things that lived in the forest. Things that only showed themselves when they chose to be seen. The native people who had lived on that land for generations had a name for this particular kind of thing that I cannot remember anymore. We in town always called them face stealers." My heart stopped for one complete beat. The stories said that if you looked at their faces, they would take yours. All of us kids assumed they were just the kind of thing adults said to keep children from wandering too far into the dark. "That is what adults do," she said. "Tell children things to keep them from getting hurt." I paused. "That is what you did too," I said. She looked at her hands. "Yes." She sighed. "One day, many years ago," she continued, "I was walking alone in these woods, just trying to clear my head. I wandered farther than I should have. As I was about to turn back, I noticed a man standing a few yards off the trail. I did not think much of it at first, figured he was hunting or just walking like me. But when he turned toward me, his face was gone, cut clean off. Everything except his teeth and his ears. My hands began to shake where they rested on the table. I did not want to believe anything she was telling me. But Jamie's face had not left my mind for a single moment since I had turned and looked at it in that clearing, and it would not leave. "I backed away from the man," she continued, "and then I saw a small shape a few yards further off the trail. A child. No older than 2 or 3 years old, completely naked in the woods, alone. I moved toward them thinking they might be in danger from the man, and then I saw what was on the ground near them. A pile. Folded skin. The holes where the eyes should have been were the only part of it I looked at before I turned my gaze away and could not bring it back. I did not know what to do. I thought about walking away." She swallowed. "But then you started to cry. A small, painful cry that broke something open in my chest before I could stop it. I could not have children of my own. She wrapped my outer shirt over your head and picked you up. And when you wrapped your tiny arms around my neck," she said, "I knew I had to protect you from whatever you were. So I kept walking deeper into the woods, not knowing what to do or where to go, only knowing I had to keep you hidden." She looked at me across the table. "I do not know who left you there," she said, "or why. I wondered for years if your real parents would come looking for you. Maybe that is part of why I wanted us to stay as hidden as we could for as long as we could." The silence that followed that sentence was the longest of my life. Then she asked the question she had been building toward from the moment she sat down. "Nestor, I do not want to ask you this, but I think I have to. When your friend did what she did, when you saw it, did any part of you feel anything other than fear?" I did not answer immediately. I had believed in the moment that I was purely terrified. But the truth was already more complicated than that, and some part of me had known it the second I turned around and looked. The sun was setting when I went back to the clearing. I did not plan to go. My feet made the decision without asking my permission. Jamie and Monty were both on their backs in the grass. Still, I stopped a few feet short of them. On the ground between their bodies there was something small, pink, soft in a way that soft things usually are not soft. I knew what it was before I reached it. I crouched down. A few insects had already found it and started their work. I brushed them away carefully with one hand, and I picked it up. The softness of it between my fingers was unlike anything I had ever touched or could have imagined touching. As the blood coated my palms, I felt the corner of my mouth begin to curl upward. I gasped at my own reaction. I dropped it. I ran. I wiped my hands on my trousers the entire distance back to the cabin. I sat in my room for a long time that night, staring at the wall. My hands were still buzzing, not with horror, with something that I did not have a word for yet. The constant fear and anxiety that had lived inside my skull for my entire life had gone completely quiet. Everything felt clear and settled in a way it never had before. And then it faded. And the thing that replaced it was the heaviest feeling I had ever experienced. The knowledge that I had caused Jamie's death, that she had been the only friend I had ever had, that she was gone. I cried until my mask was soaked completely through, and I could barely breathe inside it. My mother checked on me several times through the door. "Just let me know if you need something," she said each time. I heard her eventually go to her own room. She closed the door. She had never closed her door at night before that evening. She never mentioned the incident again after that. And over the following days, she stopped moving through the cabin like a mother and started moving through it like someone trying not to make eye contact with a dog she was not certain of. The guilt never went away, but neither did the craving. It began the way a craving for something sweet might begin after going a very long time without it. A background awareness, a mild and manageable pull at the edge of daily life. But some nights it was something closer to starvation. On one of those nights, I saw my mother occupied with chores in the yard, and I found myself approaching her from behind, with my hands already moving toward the knot at my neck, before I had consciously decided to move at all. She heard my footsteps and turned around. She dropped what she was holding. The fear on her face, the face of the woman who had saved my life, who had loved me while knowing what I was, who had given up everything to hide in the woods with me for over a decade. Seeing her look at me that way hurt worse than almost anything else I had experienced. She slept with a chair against her door that night, and most nights that followed. One night while she slept, I went to her craft room and found a large leather needle and a thick roll of twine. I carried them to my room. I sat on the edge of my bed with the needle in one hand and the edge of the mask in the other. I understood that the craving was not going to stop on its own. I understood that I was not capable of choosing to keep the mask on when the hunger became severe enough. The only solution was to make the choice impossible. I pressed the needle against the side of my neck and pushed it through the skin and then through the leather. I threaded the twine and pulled it tight. I did not stop. I did not allow myself to stop at any point. When it was done, the mask was no longer something I wore. It was part of me, fixed, permanent. For the first time in my life, it felt warm against my skin. I breathed in the leathery smell of it and lay back on my bed, grateful that I would never hurt anyone the way I had hurt Jamie. My bed is much more comfortable these days, a weighted blanket, a proper goose-down pillow. Things I could not have imagined existing as a child lying on a cot in the Appalachian woods. In a month, it will be 10 years since I left the forest. My mother passed away a year before I left. Being out there alone without her was a loneliness beyond what words can accurately hold. Some nights now, I would pay a great deal of money to have that silence back. My apartment overlooks a busy downtown area of the city. The view is genuinely extraordinary at certain times of day and night. But the noise can become overwhelming, and I keep a pair of noise-canceling headphones beside the bed for the worst of it. A gift from someone I used to know. Today is my day off, and the apartment has fallen into a state of disorder. I go to the bathroom first and look in the mirror. My day mask looks back at me from the glass. Milky white, thin plastic, contoured precisely to every shape of my face below the hairline. It covers everything except my hair and my ears. The pale scars at my neck where I did the stitching all those years ago have faded to almost nothing over time. No one has ever asked about them directly. Along the bathroom counter, I keep the others arranged in a row. Masks I have made myself over the years, improving them slowly through many iterations. For a period after leaving the woods, I could manage with cruder versions, relying on the explanation of scarring to deflect the questions that came. But I discovered over time that people need to see something that functions like a real face, eyes that react to what they see, lips that move when speaking, cheeks that shift when a smile is formed. I have almost perfected it. They fit every contour of my face now and match my skin tone with a precision that took years to achieve. Only occasionally will someone catch something slightly wrong. A faint, plasticky quality to the surface. A subtle line at the edge where the lip meets the skin. A quality to the whole thing that they cannot name and cannot locate, but that registers somewhere below full awareness. They always continue about their day, telling themselves it was their imagination, that they were tired, that the light in the room was unusual. I start with my bedroom, the wardrobe first. Before getting into the clothes piled in the back, I pull out the leather box from the far corner of the lowest shelf. I carry it to the bed. I lift the flap. The smile that comes over me is immediate and involuntary. 23. I have managed to preserve most of them very well. The most recent two are from the woman who used to clean this apartment before she stopped coming. Looking at all the empty eye sockets and the ragged preserved edges always gives me a small and reliable echo of the elation I first felt that afternoon in the clearing. It also makes me sad. Always a little sad, alongside the other thing. Sad that I never went back for Jamie's before the forest took it. It was the first one. It should have been the best one. I set the box back gently. I am going to need a better storage system very soon. I have plans for several more. And there it is. A boy born somewhere in these mountains with a face that unmakes whatever looks at it. A mother who tried to protect both him and the world from what he was. A girl who asked one question too many on a warm afternoon in a clearing. And a man who lives among us now, moving through the city every day, wearing a perfect face, keeping lists, making room. The most frightening thing about this story is not what happened in those Appalachian woods. It is the apartment with the city view. It is the neighbor you pass in the corridor whose smile is almost exactly right. Almost. If this story is still sitting with you right now, drop a comment below and tell me where you are watching from. Whether you are watching from Lagos or London, from Accra or Atlanta, from somewhere where you are suddenly and acutely aware of the faces of the people around you, say hello. Drop your city. Drop your country. Tell me you made it to the end. I read every single one. If you have not yet subscribed to DreadRelic, do it right now. Hit that subscribe button. Ring the notification bell. Every single week we go somewhere darker than the week before, and I would genuinely hate for you to miss what is coming next. And if this story found the part of you that just looked up from the screen at whoever else is in the room with you, tap the like button. It helps more than you know. Until next time, sleep well, if you can.